best conforming.
Secretariat, are you ready to go live now?
Yes, Chair. You can go ahead.
Welcome, everyone, to the 7th virtual meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity. This is the committee's second public hearing into the human rights of socially displaced persons in Trinidad and Tobago, with specific focus on their treatment and relocation from Port of Spain public spaces. This is a virtual meeting, and so we have to ensure that our microphones are muted when we are not speaking, to ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and that our faces are clearly visible on the screens. Members of the listening and viewing audience are invited to post or send their comments via the Parliament's various social media platforms, whether that be Facebook, Parview, the Parliament's YouTube channel, and Twitter. My name is Dr. Nian Gaspidoli, and I am the chairman of this committee, and I'd like at this time to invite the other members of the committee to introduce themselves. Starting with our vice chairman.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Madam Chairman. I'm Lisa Morris-Julian, member.
Senator Thompson-Ahi.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, members. I am Hazel Thompson-Ahi, member.
Good morning. My name is Kazim Hussein, member.
Secretary, I think we have some other members on.
Yeah, you could go ahead. I'm not seeing the feeds. I think there's probably a technical issue.
All right, well, we should have some other members on, and they will join us presently as we continue into the public hearing. I would like to facilitate the introduction now of members of the representatives of the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, the Ministry of Health, the Port of Spain City Corporation, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and the Office of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Legal Affairs. Can I ask first for the representatives from the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services to introduce themselves?
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. I am Jacqueline Johnson, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry.
Good morning, Madam Chair and all members. I am Jennifer Jitaram, Senior Legal Officer.
Good morning, Chair and members. I am Christine John Guy, Acting Director of Social Welfare.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair and members. I'm Maureen Treasurer, Director of Social Displacement Unit.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. I am Mr. Alison, Acting Director, Social Planning and Research.
I want to thank the Ministry of Social Development and their team for joining us. Can we have the introduction of the representatives from the Ministry of Health at this time?
Good morning. I am Dr. Hazel Othello, Director of Mental Health in the Ministry of Health.
Good morning. I am Keisha Lewis, the General Manager of Mental Health Services at the Northwest Regions.
Morning. I am Marsha Connell, State Counsel, Ministry of Health.
All right. Is there anyone else on the Ministry of Health with us? If not, thank you very much from the Ministry of Health. And we have the introduction of the members of the Port of Spain City Corporation with us today, please.
Introduce myself. I am Joel Martinez, the Mayor of the capital city, Port of Spain.
Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members. I am Esther O'Brien, Acting CEO for the Spain Corporation.
Good morning, Madam Chairperson and members. I am Rhonda Latiste, Acting Public Health Inspector for the Spain Corporation.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. I'm Acting Inspector Dillian of the Port of Spain City Police.
Is there anyone else on the Port of Spain City Corporation? If not, thank you for that introduction. Can we have the introductions now from the persons who are here with us from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, please?
Good morning, ma'am. The name is Daniel Moore. I'm the Assistant Commissioner of Police Northwest.
Good morning, ma'am. My name is Terrence Dick. I am a Sergeant of Police and the legal advisor to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, all. My name is Shireen Pollard. I am the Civilian Manager of the Gender-Based Violence Unit within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service.
Thank you and welcome to you. There's someone else? Thank you and welcome to the members of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And can we have now the introductions of the persons who are with us from the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs?
Good morning, everyone. I am Sean O'Brien, the Acting Permanent Secretary.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. I'm Carl Esdell, Research and Policy Officer at the Secretary of.
So if that is it, I want to thank all of the representatives who are here with us today. The objective of our inquiry is to examine the treatment of socially displaced persons with respect to their relocation and from the public spaces in Port of Spain. I would like to ask now the various representatives to make brief opening remarks, and we will start with Ms. Jacqueline Johnson, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services.
Madam Chair, I'll be brief. This is our second appearance. We just want to put on the table that we're prepared to collaborate with all the key stakeholders to ensure the successful rehabilitation of all street journalists. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have brief opening remarks from Dr. Hazel Othello, the Director of Mental Health Services, Ministry of Health?
Good morning again. From the Ministry of Health, we have provided all the additional information that was requested of us to the best of our ability so to do. And we are once again quite happy to answer your questions and to continue our work towards ensuring that the best possible care is provided to this vulnerable group of citizens. Thank you.
And we now have brief remarks from the Acting Permanent Secretary of the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs, Mr. Sean O'Brien.
Morning again, all. Our ministry would provide advice, legal advice, as to the conventions, the laws, and the regulations that apply to dealing with this vulnerable cohort. And I hope we can be successful in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. And can we have brief opening remarks from Alderman Joel Martinez, the Mayor of Port of Spain, please?
Good morning to you. From the first time I became the Mayor of Port of Spain in 2016, myself, the council, members of administration have been seeking to find the right solution to be able to assist the homeless in a very humane and positive manner. And we have been working with all the various stakeholders for the time being in trying to ensure that we find a solution before I exit from my term of office.
Thank you, Mayor. And can we have brief opening remarks from Mr. Daniel Moore, Assistant Commissioner of Police of Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, please?
Good morning, everyone. We are here to support what is lawful, to ensure that the city is safe and ensure that, the public are free from, all these contamination they have been going through based on these homeless people.
Thank you. As we begin the questioning, and I will lead off, I want to remind both the committee members as well as the representatives to direct your questions through the chair and to indicate that when you are speaking, you activate the microphone on your device, but when you are acknowledged by the chair and you finish your contribution, you can turn off your microphone so we don't have too much feedback and we flow very smoothly in this virtual proceeding. Now, this is our second round of public inquiry, and as we were discussing with the committee, the issue of the human rights of the socially displaced, that is where we want to place our sharp focus. And I think the mayor mentioned it when he spoke about, dealing with it in the most humane way and in the way that preserves the rights of the socially displaced. And my first question goes to the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs. In looking at your submission, I noted that there was no actual law in place to allow for the involuntary or voluntary movement of socially displaced persons from the streets. I wanted a little bit of clarity on that and to understand on the basis of anything other than violent behavior, which was mentioned in submission, is there a legal basis to move the socially displaced persons from the streets?
Thank you for the question, Chair. I think I'll let Mr. Esdale answer that, seeing that it's more legal in nature.
Sure.
Good morning. The question that you posed, I think, was deemed that it should be best that the social. Yes, sir. Are you hearing me?
No, we're not hearing you well.
Give me 1 second. I have a connection.
Mr. O'Brien, while Mr. Esdale is sorting out his connection issue, is there any clarity you'd want to give on the basis of the opinion provided with respect to the legal provision to allow for voluntary and involuntary removal of socially displaced persons?
Well, Chair, that is essentially a legal question, and I'm here in an administrative capacity. However, what I can say is that what legal authority we would have would be based from the conventions found in the UN Handbook for the Protection of Internally Displaced Persons. More specifically, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the International Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women, the International Convention on the Rights of the Child, and the International Convention on the Rights of Persons from Disabilities. Now, these are international conventions that would broadly apply to our scenario here in Trinidad and Tobago. So where our human rights, we have a division called the International Law and Human Rights Division, and they would have rendered this opinion that these broad conventions are the ones that would guide us in any effort to deal with, as I mentioned before, a very socially vulnerable cohort. So we don't have specific laws that would govern it, but we must be guided by these broader UN conventions.
I see Mr. Esdell is back, and I'm hoping we can hear him better.
Okay, further to what Mr. O'Brien said. To deal with this matter, we have in place the Socially Displaced Person Act of 2000, which has not been fully proclaimed. So further on what Mr. O'Brien stated, the international laws will fall in place for the general provisions. Until Act, our Socially Displaced Person Act is fully proclaimed and fully functional, that's depend on the international.
Okay. And the question of the act, which has not been fully proclaimed, what exactly would be preventing the full proclamation of this act?
I think that question will have to be addressed to the Ministry of Social Development, because there are several policy issues that were certain parts of the act that were still being between law reform and CPC, it will still being sorted out. So I think that question will have to be addressed to the Ministry of Social Development.
Okay. So could I redirect then to the Ministry of Social Development as to what are the specific reasons why the Act has not yet been proclaimed, though assented to?
Madam Chair, there are several problematic issues related to the Act, and I'll have our senior legal officer identify most of them to you. Mr. Turan?
Madam Chair, the Act as it is has not been proclaimed to date. It has been assented to in 2000, but there are some issues surrounding the Act itself. As it is, the Act provides for, of course, the interpretation section, the provision for social displacement unit, the establishment of that, the social displacement board, the assessment and care centers. That is the Act's current nature. However, some of the problems that the ministry, through its depth research, etc., and practical reasons, one would be the whole issue of voluntary to involuntary movement of street dwellers. That issue is paramount in terms of the need for coordination amongst the relevant stakeholders as well as state entities and bodies. So there's a need for more holistic networking so that there would be proper measures and procedure in place in the ways to adequately and sufficiently address the situation. So that is one of the tasks that we have to make sure that we, through analysis, get it right. There's the issue of the capacity of the existing social displacement unit. In terms of the current Act as it is, the burden or responsibilities placed on the unit to basically deal with the involuntary movement of persons. So the unit as it is does not have the sufficient human resources, as well as the ministry doesn't have the proper infrastructure at the moment to really deal with the issue. So we are definitely working assiduously to address those issues. There's the issue of the lengthy time involved in terms of obtaining court orders to get the avenue of involuntary movement of persons. So that court order process is lengthy. So we're working on ways to try to have amendments to the current Act in order to have a smooth transition and equitable justice system in dealing with the rights of such persons. There's also the need to have the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, to have the proper standard of care, service delivery procedure and care in order so that we can have all measures in place. So basically the ministry from our end, we are reviewing the provisions of the Act as it is. We have a draft policy in place. We're fine-tuning it with an aim to really have a holistic approach to addressing the issues at hand.
Can I ask, this act is 2000, we're in 2021 at this point in time. How long has this revision of the policy been taking place?
Madam Chair, it has been a long time since the ministry has been engaged in this review of the legislation and policy, but in 2020, it was placed on 2021 rather. Sorry, it has been placed on our agenda to treat with expeditiously.
And I saw in the submission that there's supposed to be a 2022 deadline for that.
Yes, we're hoping to complete in this fiscal.
So the issue of amending the policy and putting that forward, which will form the basis of some legislative change based on the act that is there now. If that is done and the act is amended in terms of being able to carry out the functions described in the policy, where would the ministry be at that point? Because at this time, what was described in terms of the challenges would cover some of the human resource, would cover some of the particular systems that will be put in place. So even with the completion of the policy in 2022, where would the ministry be with respect to really being able to carry out the provisions of the new policy?
Madam Chair, the revision of the legislation is really intended to give the ministry a little bit more teeth in terms of implementing the program to rehabilitate our street dwellers. It has to be seen within the framework of care and protection for that vulnerable group. So there's a lot of things which you need to put in place in order to effectively implement the legislation. Several of those things have already been done. We have created the social displacement unit. We have identified a current site for those clients, and we are engaged in creating and identifying a site for a custom-built facility to manage those the assessment and placement of those clients. And we have also established 2 facilities that would accommodate those clients on a long-term basis while we work with them to find alternative means for their independent living. So it's a continuum of care that we're looking at right now for those clients. The legislation as it is now does not allow us to force anyone off the streets. We have to depend on we are now using an involuntary voluntary system where we go out on the streets and we ask people to come with us to the current facility that we have at Riverside Plus car park. In order to really implement the legislation and to effectively move people, we need to be able to force people to come off the streets. And that is where we don't have that kind of authority to do. The ministry cannot force anyone. We can invite them and encourage and motivate them to come to the center, but we cannot, without the assistance of the other agencies, key stakeholders currently, like the police, the city corporation, and Ministry of Health, we cannot move the client from off the street. And I think once the legislation is in place and we have that authority, all the things that we are doing currently will gel into a framework that would allow us to care and protect those clients.
Okay. So may I ask then, the Ministry of Health, the City Corporation, and the police, just very briefly, for their specific roles in this removal of the socially displaced, considering in the context of there being no legislation that allows really or definitively gives legal provision for the involuntary removal or relocation of socially displaced persons. If we could start with the Ministry of Health.
Thank you for your question, Madam Chairperson. The role of the Ministry of Health is directly involved, is directly relevant when there are persons on the street who have mental health concerns, where they are in need of care and treatment in a hospital setting, or even if they're not in need of hospitalization, they have mental health needs. With respect to those who do not need hospitalization, again, we can only encourage them to access outpatient mental health services, which exist across Trinidad and Tobago. For those who require hospitalization, we have mental health officers, and we spoke about that at the last meeting of this committee, and they can intervene when there is someone in a public place who needs care and treatment in hospital and assist in getting that person admitted to the nearest psychiatric hospital, which would be at this time either the San Fernando General, the St. Anne's Hospital, or the Tobago Scarborough Hospital.
And that can be involuntary?
That can be involuntary, providing that the person is in a public place and that the mental health officer is satisfied that the person is in need of care and treatment in hospital. The person is taken to the hospital, the person is evaluated by a medical doctor in the emergency room setting, and that doctor has to also agree that that person needs hospitalization and do the necessary procedures for that admission, after which that person will continue to get care and treatment in hospital.
Okay. And thank you. This from the City Corporation side. Is there any leeway or anything that allows the City Corporation to remove socially displaced persons on an involuntary basis from the streets?
Good morning, through the chair. Acting Inspector Villiers. The role of the City Police in the relocation of the and removal of socially displaced persons is more of a supportive role, one that works with the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services to assess and assist in whatever initiative that they may use. Because we are guided by the law, and the Act specifically states our limitation and what we can do. We can assist and support. That's as far as the police can do relative to the support.
So there's no role for the Port of Spain City Corporation in removing involuntary removal of persons, socially displaced persons?
No, our hands are tied in the removal because the Act specifically states who are the persons authorized under the Mental Health Act to remove persons off the streets who are mentally ill. We are not, we don't have the capacity to determine that. We have done some training. We have had some training from the Ministry of Social Development, and it better assist the officers in evaluating, but we are not able to involuntarily move persons off the street.
All right, and thank you. From the police service side now, is there any legal way that the police can involuntarily remove persons from the street, those socially displaced persons?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sergeant Dick here. In 2016, a gentleman by the name of Hugh Bernard, sued the mayor, the alderman, the councillors, and those issues, his issues were exactly based on this question, whether he can be removed off the street. He wanted to live in the Tamran Square. In that particular judgment, they listed the Police Service Act, the Summary Offences Act, and the Mental Health Act to show that there were offences that could be dealt with under that act, namely sleeping in, namely if you find anyone loitering. However, what came up in that judgment as well is that homelessness is not a crime. So to piggyback on the legislation to deal with homelessness, we have tried that already, and the court has said we are approaching it in the wrong way. So if we were to apply the crime to homelessness, we would have a difficulty in saying that the person's committed a crime in the true sense of what the legislation speaks about. So that particular judgment, which was brought, they listed all the human rights issues, what the people are entitled to, what their rights. Now, though despite Mr. Bernard lost because he brought the wrong type of action before the court, what the court alluded to was that the way in which homelessness should be treated, while there may be legislation whereby there are crimes under the Summary Offences Act, the Mental Health Act, and the Police Service Act, it cannot be approached the same way in dealing with homelessness as you would approach a crime. So our hands are basically tied if we were to just say, let's go and move these people and charge everyone, especially now in the pandemic, we have to carry them to court. The fine for sleeping is $200. They're going to be out. We can't house them in a station based on their condition. We have to medically examine them to see whether or not they either have COVID, they have other sicknesses or whatever. So to treat them as criminals under the guise that we are treating with homelessness, we, the police, are going to find ourselves at risk, not only in the matters being this, but actions are being will be brought against the police in punitive damage and that sort of thing. So basically our hands are tied criminally, though those pieces of legislation exist.
Okay, so understood. So the Ministry of Social Development has a rule, Ministry of Health has a rule, and the police has a rule, and there are some circumstances in which the action can be taken to move persons, socially displaced persons off the streets, but there is no definitive legal provision at this time. So the question I'd like to ask is, in terms of the main role and focus of the dealing with the persons who are socially displaced, that falls squarely under the Ministry of Social Development's remit? Regardless of the fact that we have other institutions clearly that do play a part, does it fall squarely under the Ministry of Social Development?
Care and rehabilitation of the clients, Madam Chair, falls squarely under the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. The issue for us is how we get the client into the care program.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I may, from the police service.
Yes.
If you may permit me, Terence Dickey. 59 of 2000, which is the said piece of legislation raised earlier on socially displaced person. Police powers usually comes from legislation. If this piece of legislation is there, we can certainly look at if it is being amended or has to be amended, what can we insert in it to give police that authority to assist the Ministry of Social Development in dealing with it and getting the persons to these care centers? A suggestion, Madam Chair.
Mm-hmm. So, and that segues very nicely, thank you, Sergeant Dick, into my next question, which would be, considering that we have recently made moves to deal with that legislation, I would like to know from the Ministry of Social Development, who exactly is making input, seeing that we have the Ministry of Health, the City Corporation, and it would, in this case, it's Port of Spain because we were dealing specifically with that. But clearly there would be San Fernando and all of the major cities, I would believe, would have this issue of the socially displaced and would need to make some input. So we have the Ministry of Health, the city corporations, we have the police, and the Ministry of Social Development. So the question is, to the Ministry of Social Development, what is the level of input or consultation with the other arms of the state that have some level of responsibility to deal with the legislation to ensure that we don't end back up in the same position we are? Because clearly there was something since 2000 which could not be enacted and has not been. And we don't want to end up in a position where there may be something of 2022 or 2023. And in 10 years hence, we are in the same position. So I'm basically asking, what is the input of the other entities that have some type of other stakeholders, major stakeholders in the enactment of the law? What is their input in what is happening there in terms of revision of the policy?
Madam Chair, the intention here is to include all stakeholders, and that is being actively pursued. We have already engaged the Ministry of Health, the City Corporation, and the police in this process. There are some other agencies that we need to include, as well as some NGOs which represent persons within the vulnerable group.
Okay. But if I am to follow on from Sergeant Dick and his suggestion that they make input, I am not certain at what level the input is coming, because it seems that there may be a disconnect between who is actually representing and making input and those who need to make that input. From the side of the police, Sergeant Dick, you made the suggestion, and I'm hearing from social development that they do have input. Are you aware of such input and who is making it? Is it coming from the right level?
Madam Chair, I was recently put into this joint select meeting, so I would not be able to tell you offhand. However, I can inquire as to who would have made those input, if they made any input. Since I'm here now, if it's left to me, we have no difficulty in getting the requisite input or from the senior advisors to say, listen, let's sit and have the act amended and see where the police powers lie, or if it can be placed in it, in what manner and that form. So it's just a matter of working with social development now to see where we can lend our assistance where that power is concerned.
All right. So I have found that in some cases, the right person from the institution, it's very important to have the right person making that input, so that when we finally get to amend this legislation, it is something that everybody has the correct type of input into, and it can actually work for the benefit. Because if we had the correct thing happening in 2000, in 2021, we would have made some input. Because what I'm hearing, based on all the submissions, is that the state and the legislation does not allow us to do exactly what is needed, which would be to remove persons and put them into the programs for care that are required. So, and at least not with allowing their human rights to not be infringed. All right. I'd like to open now for some contributions from the other members of the committee. Senator Thompson-Ahi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you've called me at the right point, having regard to what you just said. You spoke about the right person and the correct input. And I want to start from that principle. We have here with us a legal opinion posed by the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality, and Diversity. And this has been furnished to us by the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs. So they drafted a legal opinion in relation to the current legal provision, which can allow for the voluntary or involuntary removal, relocation of socially displaced persons from the streets of Port-of-Spain without infringing the human rights of these persons. And the first issue that was addressed is, what are the legal provisions which can allow for the voluntary or involuntary removal or relocation of socially displaced persons from the streets of Port-of-Spain without infringing the human rights of these persons. Madam Chair, we have in this opinion international law which should guide our deliberations, because we're talking about policy and we're talking about laws. And before we begin to revise any law, we start with a policy. That is actually the framework, the substratum, the foundation for any laws that we put in place. So we have here a table extracted from the United Nations Handbook for the Protection of Internally Displaced Persons, Provisional Release 2007, which identifies relevant international law instruments and their focus. And what the Attorney General's office reminds us is that it must be borne in mind that Trinidad and Tobago is only bound by the international instruments to which it is a party. Now you will see from what before you that I have changed a bit of the words. And we are told that the only provisions from the following international law instruments apply to Trinidad and Tobago. And there is a list: the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the International Convention on the Elimination of all forms of racial discrimination, and the International Convention on the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, the International Convention on the Rights of the Child, and the International Convention on the Rights of Persons, it should be with disabilities. So here is this opinion telling us these are the only provisions, international provisions, which apply and which, therefore, that is what should guide our policies, and that should offer the input into our laws. So when we look at the overview of the selected international human rights instruments, there is one on the Convention concerning the Prohibition on Immediate Action for the Elimination of the Worst Forms of Child Labor, ILO Convention number 182 of 1999. And this is where I have a serious problem, because what we are told is that this is not one of the conventions to which we are a party. And therefore, we should not be looking at it. But in fact, Trinidad and Tobago has ratified this convention on 20th of April 2003. And when you look at the National Child Policy, on page 3, it gives you the International Convention and Protocols, and that is included there. So you're talking about the number of government ministries that should be involved in this exercise. And I would make a strong recommendation that the OPM, Gender and Child Affairs, the Office of the Prime Minister, that they should come in and be party to the deliberations to inform the legislation. There are children who are homeless, we know, in Trinidad and Tobago at times, would have to be rescued. So we must look at the provisions which govern them. We must look at bringing, if there are other conventions that we have not yet ratified, we ought to look at bringing those conventions into our law so that, we would know that we are complying with the international law. So therefore, when we look at the optional protocol that we have not yet ratified, that the Office of the Prime Minister, definitely Gender and Child Affairs, will have some input into the optional protocol on the sale of children, child prostitution, and child pornography 2000, which the ministry, in their opinion, they've said this is these international human rights instruments that guide the rest of the world, and therefore that also should be guiding us. So before we go further, I think we ought to ask the department to have another look at what we are provided to guide us, because as you said, we must have the correct input before we go further, because if we don't do that, it means that we may not be going in the direction that we ought to be going. We will not be having our laws up to date or correct in terms of our obligations. And I would urge us, as we've been told as parliamentarians, look at the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, so that whatever we do, we must always see how does this Agenda for Sustainable Development, how does this affect what we do? What are the agendas? What are the targets here? So that we do something. We've waited so long to get it right. Let us not do it in a halfway way. Let us do it properly, so that when we present a law, we would not be going and having to amend and amend, because in the first place, we're doing it right. We think sometimes we don't have time to do it properly, but we always have time to do it over. That is wasting time and wasting resources. So I would urge us to do whatever we have to do it properly, take our time. We have waited long enough. So what is if we take a little longer? What important thing is to get it right. And we have the expertise within the various ministries. There are people there, who know better and who ought to do better. It is not a very overworked department, I am told. And I think we have to urge them to do the thing right, so that if they're guiding us, that they guide us in the right direction, so that we do not fall into error time and time again. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Thompson-Ahi. Do we have other members of the committee who would wish to? Minister Morris-Julian.
Madam Chair, through you, I would like to ask the PS of Social Development and Family Services, what has been the level of engagement with the other entities so far? Could you give us some information on what has been discussed by your team so far?
Madam Chair, since 2017, we have been engaging, based on my recent look at the records, the key stakeholders involved in the care and protection of our street dwellers. There's a long list here of persons and agencies that we have been engaging. The key ones might be the Ministry of National Security, Rural Development, and Local Government and Health. But there are quite a bit of other agencies that we have been engaging, including the Ministry of Housing. The continuum of care for these people requires that we engage all these stakeholders in providing the care and protection for street dwellers from the time they are assessed or enter one of our facilities. We did have some public consultations in 2017, I believe, as well, on the whole issue of street dwelling. So the engagement of the stakeholders is an ongoing process. Our recent engagement in the training, and this was a collaborative effort between the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Social Development, and the Port of Spain City Corporation, is evidence of that kind of collaboration in December of 2021.
Through you, Madam Chair. Excuse me, Madam PS. You said in December 2021 there was further discussion. I didn't quite.
In December of 2021, we engaged in training for the officers who are working the streets to get the street dwellers to voluntarily come with us to the care facility that we have provided. That's the training that was undertaken in December of 2021.
Thank you, Madam PS. I'm very heartened to hear that. Madam Chairman, through you again, if I may address His Worship the Mayor of Port of Spain. Your Worship, could you just let me know exactly what is the Council's policy regarding the situation? As you know, capital city, and you have said and you have stated in the press several times about dealing with the homeless situations. But I would like to know, and I'm sure the committee would appreciate, What is the policy of the council?
Madam Minister, good morning to you. And one of the things that we seek to have done, seeing that we have no laws that govern the voluntary or involuntary removal of homeless people, was to use the fact that we have a voluntary side, to use the voluntary side of things. And in considering the voluntary side of things, we attempted in my last dispensation with the council to seek a piece of land to build what you call a homeless assistance office, and to be able to facilitate those homeless people who are on the streets. That would have engaged the Social Development Ministry, and what would have happened then is that the approach was done through, I believe, Ministry of Housing. However, it fell through, and we came back to square one a couple of years later. However, what we engaged the Archbishop of Port of Spain, and that's where the ground floor of the current CSDP building, we were able to build a facility underneath there, close off the road, to be able to assist the NGOs in encouraging them to move, instead of feeding the homeless throughout the city of Port of Spain, to go to one particular location where we can basically offer not just a place to feed them, but if they came there, it would be able to accommodate them with a meal, accommodate them with showers, allow a doctor maybe to look after them, see if they have any issues that they needed, any sort of treatment. They have some people who we understand are mentally ill. They may have needed to take their medication, but because they're on the streets, they would not have been cared for, and provide temporary shelter at the same time. Those were some of the things that we were doing. What we tried to do also was to create something called a move along policy, whereby we know that the pavements are under the care of the Port of Spain Corporation, and we have a law in Trinidad that has no loitering. So we encourage the police to encourage the homeless person to, if you want to be fed, to go to the homeless center, which is the bottom of the CSDP building. In the meantime, while we don't have a proper structured building and operate at a more sort of outside of the context of being able to move them, but to encourage them to be able to come there. And if they can get a night shelter, they could get clean clothes, they can get barbering taking place, they can get a meal, they can get a shower, we will start to see the face of the homeless changing. The other approach after that was to encourage corporate Trinidad to really pick a night, because we have 365 nights in the year, whereby you can donate towards the meal, or the change of clothes, or the barbering, or whatever it is, or even pay a doctor for just one day or one night in your whole corporate life. And you can do that on an annual basis, and you can do it through where you can encourage your staff to come and feed, or you can pay for it and have it done, but to get corporate involvement, and while the Ministry of Social Development would have been trying to arrange a building so that we can get more structure down the road, and if the law is coming after, it would sort of help, because we know that we can't pick them up, but if we encourage them to be able to get help and not be under any duress at all, we may be able to get somewhere. And that was basically what the corporation was looking at, together with the Homeless Assistance Office and the Social Development Ministry, and so on. COVID really came in and spoiled the progress that we were making. However, we were starting to get some to get some movement on it. As a matter of fact, during COVID, we housed the Social Development Ministry, and we were able to get the Army to come and build showers and that sort of thing. And at the same time, we were able to house about 64 people. We got a lot of donations in that period of time towards sanitation and food and that sort of thing, because food was never really an issue. And we were able to care for 64 homeless people during that COVID period. So at the end of the day, sometimes we wait for the law to happen, and we don't really have to wait for the law to happen. If we do things that will encourage people to move in a particular direction and guide them and help them to understand the benefit of it, we would have been able to make some form of progress. The thing about it is that we sit and wait and wait and wait and wait, and we are always fixing the law, trying to do something about it paper-wise, when we could actually have been on the ground doing something about it, and we wouldn't have a homeless person looking like they're on the street 25 years, all right? Whereby, because if a homeless person becomes homeless today, they will look just like you and me. What will happen is, over time and lack of caring, they will look the way they currently look. But you can bring them back to some form of respectability. The thing is, you may not be able to house them permanently, but if you send them back out on the street, and then eventually you will know the ones who you can maybe give them jobs to pick up plastic on the street, or to sweep our squares, or and pick up leaves and that sort of thing, and give them something meaningful to do in the meantime. I was going to prepare to do that through the Mayor's Fund, and allow us to be able to employ a couple of them and allow them to do things within the city of a nature that will bring some form of action, and that would have been the process that we were looking to do. It is still out there, because at the end of the day, we can do something about it, but we just have to put our heads together. And I'm very happy to be here this morning, and I'm happy that I'm part of the discussion. We have also, at this present time, we are currently in mediation with the Homeless Assistance Office, the Ministry of Social Development, and the Port of Spain Corporation to look at a sort of a policy or guiding document to help us to be able to care for the homeless in a more collective and progressive way. That mediation is done by Justice Kokaram. It was supposed to be an appeal from the last court case that was supposed to have gone to the High Court. Instead of going to the High Court, we felt that we can have a discussion and really get all of us to come together to realize some form of progress and possibility, and that those stakeholders, which are the homeless, can feel a sense of us taking care of them and not us forcing them to take care of them.
If I may, to just stick a pin here, seeing that the mayor raised this, and it kind of harkens back to a question I asked first. If I were to ask, can any one of the agencies, and I'm asking social development, seeing that it falls squarely under social development, the care and rehabilitation of socially displaced persons. If I were to ask, how many socially displaced persons do we have in the city of Port of Spain? And if I were to posit that, who is really paying attention to this? And is there enough emphasis on removing the ones that can be removed? Because there's clearly some categories of persons that can be removed. Can I address that to Ministry of Social Development? Who is keeping count of what's happening? Who is looking at it? And is there enough emphasis on removing those who can be removed? And is there really attention being paid to this?
Madam Chair, the Ministry of Social Development is keeping the count for street dwellers. Last March, we did a count. That turned up 219 persons.
But that's last March 2021? March 2021, yes. Right?
COVID, that was COVID.
So what unit deals with the actual keeping count, looking at what's happening? What's that unit?
unit, Madam Chair, is the Social Displacement Unit, which was established when the Act was assented to.
So that's established.
The Social Displacement Unit has, yes, it's not proclaimed, but it was assented to in 2000. So the social
unit was established in 2000.
Yes. The unit was established in August of 1999, and that is the unit which takes responsibility for homeless persons. That's the Social Displacement Unit. It is headed by an executive director, and there's some social workers in there, and there's some officers in there who do the count on the street.
How many officers are presently employed in that unit?
We currently have a total of 7 officers in that unit.
And how much is established to be present in that unit?
The Act establishes the need for several officers, Chair, including doctors and nurses at an assessment center, including the director who would deal with the administrative aspect of the operations. What we have done is establish the Social Displacement Unit, treating with the administrative and client service at the level of the streets within the division. The division currently has 7 members of staff.
Can you tell me how much the division should have?
The division was created with 7 members of staff. Chair.
Okay, there's 7 members now, but you referenced a certain type of structure that I don't think is present now. So I'm asking, what should it have? I'm trying to determine if the unit is operating efficiently.
Madam Chair, the Act requires a particular structure which we do not have in place at Section 6. We do not have that in place. What we created is a unit in 1999 with 7 members of staff. 3 of those positions, as we indicated in our submission, we are currently shortlisting for those 3 vacant positions. The other 4 positions are filled. And those would include the persons who walk the street and do the counts and encourage persons to follow them to the center.
So you have 4 persons doing that?
No.
Currently?
No. Currently, we have 2 people doing that function. And it's
countrywide?
Countrywide.
And how many does the Act provide for in that particular function?
The Act provides for 1 field officer.
In the country?
That's what the Act provides for, and we created 5.
Okay. So a part of the revision of the policy then, do you consider these 2 persons sufficient?
Madam Chair, the review of the staffing of that unit is of critical importance. This will not meet the requirements for ensuring that street dwellers, homeless persons are properly cared for. The current staffing as approved will not meet the needs given the strategy that we have outlined to treat with homelessness. So this must be reviewed when we consider the revisions in the Act. And this is being done simultaneously as we review the Act.
So the circumstances we find ourselves in currently really speaks to the fact that this unit cannot adequately fulfill its function based on what is provided for in the Act and what currently exists. So really, if we were to ask the question, is sufficient attention being paid to the homeless and the number of them and their circumstances? And is there enough emphasis on removing those who can be removed based on what is presently, the present circumstances? The answer would have to be no. There is not enough staffing. There's not the particular structure that will allow for this to take place. And the question is, I'm hearing the discussion happening since 2017. And the question is, why is this taking so long? Because I am certain there must be other jurisdictions where there would be legislation and so on. What is the challenge that would allow for this to be taking so long to even come to the place where there's a policy in place to amend the legislation? Because I'm asking that in the context of getting to a solution, because I'm hearing the mayor speaking about some initiatives that he would like to enact, and he would like to have social development on board for that. And I'm considering the fact that social development has the primary responsibility for care and rehabilitation. And I'm hearing that, I'm seeing an after 2000, I'm hearing consultations and revision of a policy since 2017. We are in 2022. And I'm trying to get to the point where we can identify what those challenges are so that we actually get something happening. Because I can posit that if there are persons who can be removed and who require treatment and enough care is not being placed on those persons because of the structure that exists now, then we may be even infringing their human rights, those who should be removed and should be receiving care and treatment. So, what is really happening with these consultations? Why is it taking so long? Do we have other law in other jurisdictions that we are consulting? We don't have to reinvent the wheel in our circumstance. What's really happening, and what's at the root of the fact that we can't seem to get this policy amended?
Madam Chair, I don't think the reason is that we can't do it. We must do it. I cannot give you a reason as to why the delay right now. I may be able to do some research to determine such. What I can say, though, is that we have a facility that is available, managed on behalf of the ministry by the St. Vincent de Paul, which provides that care for those people who we are able to remove from the streets. We continue to work with that NGO to ensure that they get the care that those who are within that confined, 112 of them that we have removed, that they get the care and protection that they need and the associated rehabilitation services. The issue for us are those who we cannot remove.
Okay, so in terms of that consultation, is what is in place to ensure that this policy is really revised in 2022 and it actually comes to fruition? Because it's been going on since 2017 and we've been having consultation and we've been having work being done, but what is in place now? You may have been there in 2017 and so on. So what is in place now to ensure that this actually comes to fruition and the country can see a policy that deals with this matter?
Madam Chair, we have completed the policy document. That's one. We have set up our own internal review committee. We have started, as I indicated, to engage some of the key agencies so that we're of the view that it can be completed in fiscal 2022. The consultations, there have been several consultations, and I do not believe that we ought to reinvent the wheel, as you rightly said. There are many countries that we have looked at in terms of the legislation, and the fact that we have now set what we call our weekly meetings to treat with this matter to have it expedited as quickly as possible. To me, sends the signal that we are prepared to have this addressed within this fiscal.
And let me just ask Alderman Martinez. You mentioned quite a few initiatives that you would have liked to have enacted and involving, of course, corporate Trinidad and Tobago and so on. What would have been the input and the role of the Ministry of Social Development in the discussion of these particular initiatives?
Madam Minister, over the last couple of years, the role was was almost non-existent. However, there was discussions upon discussions upon discussions, and no action. And real action came just before COVID occurred in 2020. And from there on, we had the current Minister of Social Development very engaged in addressing the problem. And I think the Ministry of Social Development then came alive in dealing with the matter under the leadership of the current minister. I have, and my council have not stopped pursuing or whatever initiatives that we can. And currently we have a Mr. Anthony Saloom, who's an NGO that has engaged himself in what you call the Homeless Assistance Office. He's operating or beginning to operate at the bottom of the CSDP structure. He has had a lot of years of experience in trying to assist this matter. He has approached various government ministers of social development over the years. He has a clear understanding of what can be done and what should be done. And I am working with him, and the Social Development Ministry division is also working to come to be able to put something in place. I think we are very near to getting it done. And if all goes well and the mediation is completed within the next couple of weeks, I think we can make tremendous progress. I would like to, I'm glad that I am here to be able to encourage our TTPS, our municipal police, the Social Development Ministry, the Ministry of Health, if we all came together to do something about it, even though we are waiting, we are working on the policy and we are working on the laws, I think we can make progress. The thing about it is, when you're doing it, right, it sends that sense of urgency and continuous movement of things happening. We sit, as I said, we sit too long to try and develop things and we don't manage them well. And when we don't do that, they fall apart, and we rely on the fall apart organizations to be able to do something about it, and they themselves don't respond well. So at this point in time, there's a sense of confidence that is growing in me, in the fact that we can get something done about it in a not too distant future. If I take the words of the Social Development Ministry, what they've just said, I feel confident that they can do it. They just need to push a little harder and give it some serious attention.
Well, we've heard from Social Development that there are weekly meetings set and there's determination to do that. What I feel, though, that as I allow Minister Maurice Shugan to come back in, is that there's need for this formal collaborative structure between the stakeholders that also has this formal type of meeting, and it needs to be put on an agenda which is aggressively pursued so that some of the other initiatives that may be possible to alleviate the circumstances can be enacted. And I do believe that it will be a much smoother process if all of the stakeholders are involved in the, let's say, non-traditional approaches to dealing with the issue. Minister Morris-Julia.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Madam Minister, I felt very heartened with the response of the Mayor and Social Development. However, I do have a question from the public, and two questions actually. Through you, Madam Minister, to Social Development. Are there considerations as to the reasons why persons are not voluntarily entering the care program? And in particular, what are the facilities like? Is it an inviting place? Because I listened very carefully to his worship and he spoke about a place not to deal with the homeless situation, but someplace that they could come in for a meal and to be taken care of temporarily. But with regards to the facilities that we have at hand, what are the conditions? Are they overcrowded? Is it sanitary? Is it safe? Is it hospitable? Because all that, Madam Chair, I'm sure you would appreciate, will affect how this would be accessed by persons on the street. Thank you very much. And then I have a follow-up question.
Chair, Social Development, were you able to hear the question?
Yes, Chair. Okay. In response to the question, we are aware that the facility was not custom built, custom designed to provide all that we need to provide along that continuum of care for the clients. But we do provide a level of care at the facility that meets the needs of most of the clients. We don't have, we cannot offer mental health services to our client at the facility, but we do offer social work support for our clients at the facility, including referrals to other agencies for backup services. The facility is managed by the St. Vincent de Paul on behalf of the state. It is monitored by our NGO unit and our social displacement unit officers visit the facility on a regular basis in relation to the admittance of clients. And we also have our M&E unit monitoring the operations at the facility. We have had no problems with the facility. We were able to encourage the NGO to put in the quarantine area for us. We know that the quarantine facilities does not allow us to admit females at this time, so we have been doing it for the men. But we have continued to provide the services to all those who would go with us for admittance at the facility. They also have services from NGOs provided with the support of the HAO, which is located in the basement area, the office for the homeless persons, and so through that arrangement with NGOs like Alcoholics Anonymous, our clients are also provided with additional support.
Thank you very much. But through you, Madam Minister, I have one more consideration. Now, His Worship the Mayor spoke about the success of the program, and I think with 64 persons, I think that is indeed well done. But Madam Chairman, I am also concerned regarding the loitering issue. What are the legal considerations? And I'm not sure if it's the Office of the Attorney General will address this. And also, the loitering issue, and as you pointed out earlier, Madam Chair, Ministry of Social Development, Ministry of Legal Affairs, the Office of the Attorney General, the City Corporation, all these entities have very distinct roles to play in order to assess and deal with this particular situation. But is the Loitering Act implemented? Does it contribute to dealing with the particular situation? I'm not sure which entity, Madam Chair, will be answering this question.
While I await someone from the other areas to...
Yes, so if someone can, from the Assistant Commissioner's office or the Office of the Attorney General could address that, please. If we could just hold on 1 minute for the chairman will be on.
Yeah, I'm right here. Sorry, I'm just having a little bit of a distortion at this time. Mr. Marjulia?
Madam Chair, I asked a question regarding the Loitering Act and how does it fit in with this particular situation. Right. And I'm trying to see which entity would answer the question.
Well, I would expect that we will have some response from the Ministry of Attorney General and Legal Affairs.
Thank you for the question, Honourable Member. But I think Sergeant Dicketer was indicating how that loitering law applied on the ground. I think he alluded to it earlier. Perhaps through you, Chair, we can ask him to repeat.
If we could have first, please, a simple explanation of what is provided for in the law. I think that will give us a nice basis, and then we can have the operationalization aspect from the police.
Okay, well, can I ask Mr. Esdell, please? Because as is indicated, that is quite a legal matter.
Sure. Is Mr. Esdell with us? If the person on Mr. Esdell's screen is speaking, we can't hear you.
Okay. Good morning. So I'm Denisha Duke, legal counsel. So I had some technical difficulties, so I'm overusing the Esdell's. So with regard to loitering in relation to...
There's a serious, some serious feedback that we are getting. I'm not sure there's another device that has audio on in the room.
Okay. So in relation to loitering laws as it concerns street dwellers, we have section 45C of the Offences Against Persons Act. It says, any person found sleeping or loitering in or under any building, including any open outhouse, veranda, gallery, passage, or gateway, or in any vehicle or vessel, without leave of the owner, occupier, or person in charge thereof, on under any wharf, jetty, bridge, footway, or in any street or other public place, and not giving a good account to himself, shall be liable to a fine of $200 or to imprisonment for 1 month. So that is the only provision that we have in relation to loitering that can be applied to street dwellers. The problem is the street dwellers more than likely would not be able to afford a fine of $200. So the imprisonment would be the only. available means to deal with the problem of the loitering legislation.
Mr. Marshallan, did you have a follow-up? Or shall we move to the police in terms of operationalization?
Yes, Madam Minister, and in particular, I would also like the feedback of the Port of Spain City Corporation municipal officers, because the last discussion that we had, the move along was said not to be successful for various reasons. And I would really like to know, through the Assistant Commissioner's office, what can be done and how is it implemented? Thank you.
Okay. Can we speak then first, the police, can we speak to operationalizing that loitering law? And then can we hear from the Port of Spain Corporation with respect to the Move Along campaign, how it was maybe related to that law and the success of that program? I'm not sure what's happening on the side of I'm not sure if it's the police or if it's the general platform, but I'm getting some distortion. I'm not hearing the members of the police. I'm not sure they're trying to speak at this time. There may be some technical issues on the side of the police because we are not hearing them. Maybe we can hear from the City Corporation first, and then hopefully we'll be able to clear up whatever happening on the side of the police. So can the Port of Spain Corporation speak to the Move Along campaign, its relationship with the loitering law, or how it's contextualized, and the success of that, please?
Through the chair, Acting Inspector Dillian from the Port of Spain City Police. Since the inception of this move along policy, as requested by the council and the mayor, officers have actively engaged members of the public who are on the streets with a view of persuading and encouraging them to visit the Center for Socially Displaced Persons at the Riverside Plaza. However, in engaging the persons, we are being challenged. We are faced with challenges in that the police in uniform are seen as an authoritative figure. And when approaching individuals, we are faced with resistance from these persons. However, even trying to enforce the laws as Section 45C of the Summary Offences Act to deal with the loitering, we are faced with challenges. The Act talks about persons given a justifiable reasons for being there. And when you engage a person and they are homeless, or they tell you they are just lying, it doesn't give the police the authority to remove them. That's a challenge. In the past, we have had persons challenging the decision of the police to remove them from the streets and say their alignment, and the court has dismissed matters. Right? One recent matter was with Dwayne Kirby Henry and PC Rapubaro and others, where the court upheld. And they say alignment was a reasonable excuse for them being out there. So we are faced with a challenge with this move along policy and enforcing the loitering as it relates to persons given a reasonable excuse. This law isn't sufficient for us to move persons involuntarily, as the sergeant had said. It doesn't form a criminal act for us to really engage persons in. And then with the new COVID protocols, taking them to court and housing them in the station, it's difficult. It's putting officers' health at risk. So this policy, yes, we do try to enforce it as much as possible, but it has a lot of challenges in doing that.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Inspector De Leon, for your very honest assessment. Madam Chair, is it possible that I direct a question to the Ministry of Health component, please? Dr. Otello, we noticed that in what was submitted to us, that a cross-mapping exercise would be done in conjunction with the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, with the number of street dwellers who are or were members, patients of the St. Anne's Hospital. Could you let me know how far have you reached with this particular program, and what is the deadline date? Because it is really crucial.
Could you ask a question again? I'm not sure if I understood what you asked. Sorry.
In the submission to the committee, it was stated the cross-mapping exercise will be done in conjunction with the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services regarding the homeless who may or are currently patients of St. Anne's Hospital, the mental health. And I would just like to know how far has that program started? What is the deadline date?
I'm looking at my submission and I'm not seeing that. Is that the initial submission?
Page 4, 2B, Ministry of Health document.
That's the first submission.
But you're familiar with the cross-mapping proposal, correct?
Not quite. That's why I'm looking for it.
All right, so it was a submission stating that with the Ministry of Social Development. I'm not sure, Madam PS, are you all familiar with that also?
I'm not familiar with it, Madam Chair.
Well, moving on, Dr. Otello, I think the point is that many of the issues for the homeless are mental health issues, and we have discussed at length the issues that by law, what we can and cannot do regarding those of sound mind, but with specific regard to the mentally ill persons who are on the streets, there was a need to collect and collate all the data and to make sure there's a cross-reference, which will help us, I would assume, would help the Ministry of Social Development, the Ministry of Health in assuring that these persons receive the help that they need. And what the committee wanted is an idea of when will that be done and the deadline. So perhaps you could check your records and please send us something, a written submission regarding that.
Yes, I would have to review those records because I don't remember, to be quite honest. Sorry about that.
Okay. Thank you very much. And just for your records, it was in the additional submission that was submitted by the Ministry of Health. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Thompson Ahi, would you want to comment at this juncture?
Yes, I want to go back a bit to the question of the police and the loitering. And I want to ask the police service, let's talk straight here. Is it that you find in this time that there is a greater sense among the general populace, especially the younger people, about rights. And there's a greater sense of self. And you find that there is more challenge to people being moved along the street because they feel that they are being targeted, because they feel that their rights are not being respected because of how they look, where they live, and where they're loitering, as against other groups who may be congregating, but they look a particular way. They seem to belong to a particular class, and therefore they are not interfered or harassed by the police. Do you get a sense that that is what is happening in the society now? That it is people fighting for their rights to exist in this society with more of a sense of equality? What do you think?
Can you all hear me now? Madam Chair, can you hear me now? Yes. To answer your question, Madam, yes, in one part. In one part, yes, some of them feel that way, and we experience that in our interaction with them verbally. You do hear comments like that. You do hear some of them saying that, and some of them feel that they are targeted. However, another part of it is that there's people that we were put before the court, and lo and behold, someone turn up saying that this is my family, and you have no right to do this or do that just because they were homeless. Now, they're not contributing to the welfare or the development of the person, but from the time the police engage them in, let's use the same loitering law, where it is interpreted by the court in a particular circumstance to say that the police had or had not a right to act. We have met with the resistance not only from the court, but from family members who turn up and indicate that we are infringing on the rights of the persons, and we have attorney addressing the police service now. So yes, it is in one part to answer your question, but it is also that other part of it. And to allude to my colleague at the municipal police, we experience that daily. We have tried it. And the court has said, listen, you don't have that right. And then we have persons bringing lawsuits against the police service because they were maliciously prosecuted, they were wrongfully arrested and unlawfully detained. So yes, to answer your question in part, but yes, we also have that other part.
I appreciate your response. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam.
Madam Chair, muted.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Do we have any other members of the committee at this time who would like to pose questions to the entities that are before us?
Madam Chair, I do have one last question, and it is from a member of the public. And the question is directed to the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. And they ask, what happens when they get them off the street? What programs are in place to make sure they do not end up right back on it? And also, another member of the public also stated that they hope that the Mayor of Port of Spain continues to pursue engagement with HCC and the Ministry of Housing, because I think that is definitely a very viable solution, especially with regards to what is happening worldwide. Thank you, Madam Minister.
Indicate, Madam Chair, as we indicated in our submission, we do have a service agreement with an NGO to provide a continuum of care for our clients at the Riverside Plaza Center for the Socially Displaced Persons. I have with me our director of the SDU here, who would share a little bit more about the program in terms of how we try to support our client. Before I go to her, I really want to say that the ministry is actively pursuing the establishment of a custom-built assessment and temporary care facility that would allow us to treat with our clients in urban areas who are displaced and have nowhere to go. And this feeds into all the other supporting type accommodation facilities that we are creating all over the country to address the needs of those persons who have found themselves without any place to live. Ms. Morel?
Thank you, Chair. Madam Chair, at the Center for Social Displaced Persons, the residents are provided with basic care and supervision on a daily basis by the staff at the center, which includes the meals, support as far as maintaining clinic appointments, whether medical or psychiatric clinic appointments. In addition, they do have social work support via the social worker attached to the social displacement unit, and casework is done. So what is casework? In most cases would involve referrals for rehabilitation or counseling or assessment or assistance to access other services that they may need. So but again, all of these services are volunteer. So the clients can opt to access in particular, the social work services. They can opt to do it, or they can opt to stay at the center and continue with their life without the intervention services.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, through you.
Yes, please, Senator.
Yes. To the Ministry of Social Development. Are demographics readily available? The people who are actually dwelling in the center, can we say exactly who they are in this rainbow country?
Yes, we can. Madam Chair, we do have some data on our clients at the facility. Disaggregated.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it can provide that if it's required.
It would be interesting because we have anecdotal evidence, but sometimes they don't always square with what's the reality on the ground. So from there, we could look to see how we move forward from the problem by knowing, what really is happening. It will inform other aspects of how we deal with, the sustainable development goal. The prime thing is no one to be left behind, so that we want to make sure that the social protection systems cater for everybody in the society. Thank you very much, Madam P.S. Madam Chair, thank you.
Do Madam we have Chair? Any? Yes, please.
Assistant Commissioner of Police Daniel Moore. Gathering in a place where homeless people are does not make them homeless. Sometimes we put all the eggs in one basket. I recall, because being for the Spain for years, several people gather there. Why they gather there? Some hustle. But to get a true picture of homelessness, we need to traverse in the night. We will see them in the day. We will see them in the day. But they are not homeless. They have a fixed address. The night paint the bigger picture of homelessness. And that's a big picture we need to look at. Because when we make a head count today, we get 50. In the night, we get 10. These 10 people have nowhere to live. But 50 people come and gather because, number one, they are lazy. They don't want to work. They want to eat. So they come and they have tea, breakfast, and dinner. Right? Or they're on a hustle. They hustle right there, because I can tell you, most of the young men, they will just hang around there and hope the police come to do an identification parade. But we call them homeless when we see them in the day. Right? So we have to be very careful with our numbers and how we deem people by seeing them in the day. The night paint the bigger picture. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. coming from the TTPS. At this time, are there any other members that would like to raise any questions on this matter with any of the entities before us?
Madam Minister, can I just ask one more question for clarification from the Ministry of Health before we end, please?
Yes, please.
Dr. Otello, again, I notice in the Ministry of Health submission on page 5, the submission indicated that the Ministry of Health intends to write to the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs to have the Act reviewed and or updated in accordance with the 2019 policy and subsequently placed on the legislative agenda. Was that done?
What has happened is that the Ministry of Health Mental Health Unit has been preoccupied with the implementation plan for that policy. The process of getting that completed was quite time consuming. We're just in the process of actually finishing the implementation plan with cost implications as was requested by the cabinet. And once that is submitted, we would be in a better place in order to write, because we can't be requesting amendments if we're not in a place to where we're ready to actually implement those things when they become law. So the policy is approved by cabinet. The implementation plan has to be submitted for approval. And then we get to the implementation phase where we begin to actually put those things in place so that when the law is ascended to and proclaimed, we will not find ourselves facing lawsuits for the inability to provide the things that the law says we must provide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Otello.
You're welcome.
Any other member of the committee would like to ask a question at this time?
Madam Chairman, I would just like to make a quick statement. And hearing the Social Development Ministry talk about the arrangement that they have with the St. Vincent de Paul with regard to the management of the CSDP. And it has been, it is my understanding that the arrangement there, although there may be a proper financial whatever arrangement there is, I think there are practices that take place there that are less than desirable. And you've heard word on the street from people who were at the center or no longer at the center or seeking to be in the center, that it is a sort of a mismanaged arrangement. And I think that the Social Development Ministry really needs to, take a look at it. And maybe that may also help in how we view the process of that whole living accommodation arrangement with the homeless or those who have had to be accommodated there for some time. Also, the Homeless Assistance Office has collected data or have been collecting data on a lot of the homeless in the city of Port of Spain over the years. And we have also done some physical move around. So I can tell you practically where every homeless person who sleeps in the street in the night or who gathers in a park or a square or on the Savannah bench or something like that, I could practically tell you where they all are. The thing about it is that we also have one particular NGO that provides over 200 meals, between 200 and 300 meals a night in the city of Port of Spain. And that is just one. So we know that the numbers, that there are a significant amount of homeless on the street. I would really like to see some form of proper location where we can treat and segregate the mentally ill from the people who are general homeless population. But that requires proper data collection and an assessment of the homeless population. If we could treat with those things, as I indicated, we have a practical solution to dealing with it temporarily, but we need some long-term provisions. And as you said, the act to be able to encourage, because you're going to have, you will always have stubborn, you will always have people who don't want to do things voluntary wise. But sometimes that might be in the minority if we handle the program properly and we do it with a genuine effort that we want to assist and help to create a program to assist the homeless.
Thank you, Alderman Martinez. I'd like to have a response on social development to the specific issue of the treatment at the centers. Minister Maurice Julian would have alluded to that. And really, it is a question of, is the Ministry of Social Development certain that what's happening at those centers do not constitute as well an infringement of the rights, human rights of the persons who are encouraged to go there?
What we have established at the Social Displacement Center at the Riverside Car Park is not the ideal, and we have mentioned that on numerous occasions. But it approximates the best that we can do at this point in time, pending the completion of the establishment of a custom design assessment facility. What we have now at CSDP is an interim assessment type facility together with the dormitories to house male and females who are willing participants of the program. That's what we have there. We have a service level agreement with the St. Vincent de Paul to ensure that these people are fed, medically taken care of, and supervised, as well as to initiate rehabilitation programs with the group. Yes, we have heard some complaints from CSDP, from residents. Some of them we have been trying to deal with as best as we can. For example, the mayor will be aware that we are hammering out right now a proper complaints procedure to be applied at the CSDP. That is currently being negotiated. And we have the key stakeholders at the table to address that. There are complaints from residents that they are not being, their personal items are being stolen. And we have been trying to get those complaints in from the city corporation, if they're reported there, from the St. Vincent de Paul, and we have been trying to address those issues as well. We have not had any complaints about persons not being fed, persons not being medically assisted. We have not had any complaints of personal abuse of our clients there. And if the mayor is aware of those, as we said at the first hearing, we need to know those things. If they're not reported to us, we can't act. We go and we visit the facility on a regular basis, as I indicated. We have a social welfare officer who operates out of our current interim assessment center. Those issues must be raised with the officer or raised with the social displacement unit so that we can take appropriate action. These persons are vulnerable and they have rights and they cannot be abused. It is for the same reason that we cannot facilitate them by using the Loitering Act. They are considered homeless, and they must be accommodated at a facility where they can be properly cared for. And it's the reason why the Act is so designed in terms of its thinking at Section 16 and 18. Because these persons ought not to come before a judge or magistrate to be charged in any way, but we ought to deal with it in a way as dictated in Section 16 of the Unproclaimed Act in a human manner. You get an order and you get them to be removed from the streets and you put them into a system that would allow them to be cared for and rehabilitated.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, I also want to put on the table that we have some long-term goals. I'm certain that the City Corporation is aware of them, to treat with this particular group in a particular way to preserve their rights, their human rights. And that includes the creation of the Custom Design Center. I heard the mayor say that it has fallen through. It has not fallen through, and we continue our negotiations with several agencies, including the Ministry of Housing, to acquire the parcel of land to construct this custom-built facility. We also have been engaged in the acquisition of long-term care facilities. 2 of them are already on stream, and we're about to go out with RFP to have them properly managed. And 1 has been promised by Petrotrin, which we are going to refurbish and have ready as well. So we have been continuously managing and implementing our strategy to deal with this particular vulnerable group.
I want to thank all of the officials who have come before us today to deal with this most important issue, because as we know, a country is judged by how we deal with our most vulnerable persons, and certainly those who are socially displaced fall into that category. P.S. Johnson, you made what just now could be considered a very stirring closing remark, but I would invite you at this time, if there's anything you would like to add in closing, please to do so now.
Madam Chair, thank you. I just want to add that we cannot sit and do nothing and say that we don't have an act. And that is why sometimes, based on my position here, I feel that we are not getting the support of the other key stakeholders in this process. I think we can do a lot if we come together, get out there on the streets and have the people removed. We continuously hear responses that we can't do anything from the city corporation or the police in some instances. But I think if we come together and seriously do that campaign, which we have been calling for, to be out there on the streets, to have the people move to a facility that is underutilized at the car park, we can achieve or start to achieve some of the objectives that we have set out in the legislation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Can I have, please, closing remarks from Dr. Hazel Othello, Mental Health Services, Ministry of Health?
At the Ministry of Health, we remain committed to providing the best quality of healthcare to all our citizens. With regard to this specific group of individuals, where our remit is largely with regard to those persons who are on the streets, who are homeless, and who have mental health problems, we remain committed to ensuring that we provide the best quality of mental health care to them, both inpatient and outpatient care. And we continue to make ourselves available to conduct evaluations when needed. And once we've made the correct determination, provide the quality of care that is needed by that individual. We also remain committed to ensuring that in everything we do, we act in accordance with the guiding principles of the Mental Health Act of Trinidad and Tobago. And as other pieces of legislation become available, we will also be guided by them. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sean O'Brien, Permanent Secretary of the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs.
Well, thank you, Chair. Thank you for this opportunity to share with the committee and the public as a whole the fact that the ministry here, we stand ready to lend legal advice on this matter. We recognize the socially displaced as a very vulnerable cohort in society. We understand that they have special needs. We understand that they can be very disruptive to the general public, but we also recognize that they have certain rights. And in dealing with these people, we must observe the laws that are applicable to Trinidad and Tobago, as well as the conventions that guide the handling of this most vulnerable cohort. And we at the ministry, we stand ready and committed to providing such legal advice and to drafting legislation as it becomes necessary.
Thank you so much. And can we have comments from Alderman Joel Martinez, the Mayor of Port of Spain?
Madam Minister, you indicated that country is judged by how we treat our citizens that are deprived and homeless. And I want to say that our city, which is our capital city, is the core card of our country. And we are certainly going to be judged that way. The thing about it is that I'm happy to hear that the Ministry of Social Development under P.S. Johnson is continuously working towards the development of the process to ensure that we, at some stage, get the homeless off the street. And I'm also heartened to hear other comments based on it. I am here to support. I am here as a stakeholder, not just a mayor of Port of Spain as the first citizen of the city, but as a stakeholder, as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, to see that we can get to the point where we really have a proper facility in place, and the treatment at the facility encourages people to come to the facility when in need of help. It's like when you are injured, you seek the hospital. If the hospital gives you bad treatment, you will go somewhere else. The thing about our center is that we talk about the laws of the land and wanting to have to put laws in place. But, sometimes if you encourage people in a particular way, you can get most of them at the center in wanting to get some kind of rehabilitation, because in any case, if we encourage the NGOs to come there and don't feed them all over the city of Port of Spain, but feed them at that facility, and they are treated well, they are given clothing and shower and that sort of thing, and taken care of and show care, we can do it together. And we don't have to wait on the laws, but let the laws come. We will do our part for the laws to come, but let us start doing it, not just tomorrow, today.
Thank you so much, Alderman Martinez. And last, but certainly not least, can we have Mr. Daniel Moore of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service with his closing comments, please.
Thanks, ma'am. My office is next door to that building. I see them every day. The issue is interacting. I will give you a testimony. I spoke to a guy. He was there. And what he told me, he said, I'm on drugs and I'm ashamed to go back home. Simple matter. He's not homeless. He just was ashamed because of the village where he lives. So sometimes we have to look at an individual basis. It's pandemic time. It may be hard to interact one-on-one. But these are some of the testimony coming from right there. So we have plenty work to do, and we cannot put all the eggs in one basket. So we need to speak to them one-on-one. And I think, social development may have some work to do of, some might need some rehabilitation, all of that. But my office, I look at them every day. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much to all of the officials who joined us today. And I'd like, in summary, to just give a little summary of what we have discussed. The treatment of the socially displaced persons, or SDPs, is broadly guided by various international conventions. There are not specific legal provisions to involuntarily remove the SDPs, as the SDP Act of 2000 has not been fully proclaimed. The SDP Act of 2000 has several problematic issues and must be revised. The procedures for collaboration between the relevant ministries, units, and agencies must be designed and formalized for maximum efficiency. The policy requires review, and that's the policy that guides that act, and is being looked at to be completed in 2022. Revision of this legislation will give the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services more power to act, and will assist in treating with the SDPs, and will allow them to have involuntary removal, which is necessary in some cases. The Ministry of Health's role is to remove persons with mental health concerns or to treat persons once they're removed from the street, and that can be involuntary. The City Corporation has no direct remit in the involuntary removal of persons, but they can act to support the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. There are some provisions by which SDPs can be removed from the street, but homelessness is not a crime. Therefore, they cannot be removed simply because they are homeless. And in some cases, they may not be homeless. However, due care must be taken for the legislation and their human rights. Care and rehabilitation of the SDPs are the remit of the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, but there is need for formal partnership with the Ministry of Health, TTPS, City Corporations, the Ministry of Attorney General and Legal Affairs, and also other NGOs who are involved, and corporate Trinidad and Tobago. And this amendment of the policy that guides the legislation must have the correct input from all of the stakeholders, including Ministry of Health, TTPS, City Corporation, and Attorney General, to be able to have the correct input into that policy. Some of the other international conventions that deal with children should be included in the considerations that guide the policy. And so the Ministry of Gender and Child Affairs should be involved in this discussion. And before us, we should always keep the 2030 agenda for sustainable development, so that when the law is being amended, all of these considerations are taken into account, so that there is no need for constant revision. The Social Displacement Unit, established in August 1999, is responsible for the socially displaced persons. Currently, the number of persons that are available and are on the books to do the actual work of interacting with the socially displaced persons is 2, and that is therefore inadequate. So the current staffing as approved will not meet the needs of our current situation, and therefore emphasis that is required is not being placed on removing the SDPs or interact with them on the street. However, the information that would guide policy development in terms of who is actually socially displaced, that information, some of it is available based on the clientele at the Center for the SDPs, and that should be used in looking at the broader question of sustainable development and how we treat with persons who are of various vulnerable groups who may be at risk for being socially displaced. The Ministry of Social Development has completed the draft policy and is now inviting review from the different stakeholders, and weekly meetings are set to ensure that this policy is completed in 2022, as it is seen as critical for dealing with this situation. Non-traditional initiatives may be possible to assist in our current situation with SDPs. However, again, it requires that partnership and direct collaboration between City Corporation, the Ministry of Social Development, and the TTPS, as well as business and the corporate sector. The Centers for Socially Displaced Persons do not provide at this time all that is necessary for the continuum of care that needs to be provided for the SDPs. However, attempts are made to provide the necessary rehabilitation, the fundamentals, and the acceptance of such services at this time, based on legislation, is voluntary. The move along policy is that the City Corporation has tried to enact is riddled with challenges, as it is not necessarily adequately catered to or catered for in the law. And the cost mapping exercise of the Ministry of Health to determine the number of homeless who are outpatients of the mental health system and therefore require careful monitoring is important, and this must be urgently pursued. The involuntary removal of the SCPs via the loitering legislation is sometimes challenged by family members in the courts, and this frustrates the system, and it limits the ability of the police to use this to remove persons from the streets. The custom-built assessment and treatment facility is being pursued by the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services as one of their long-term goals to humanely deal with our SDPs. There have been reports of less than desirable practices at the centers for SDPs, and that may in fact contribute to infringement of the human rights of the socially displaced persons. This warrants further investigation by the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, and attention is being paid to institute a complaints system which can address these matters. And the ministry holds out to all stakeholders that if there's information that they have or complaints that can be addressed, please forward it to the ministry so that they can be adequately dealt with at this point in time, even as that system of receiving complaints is being developed. So this just constitutes some of the things that we would have discussed as we looked at the human rights involved in the treatment and the removal or relocation of the socially displaced persons with specific reference to Port of Spain and environs. I would like to thank all of our officials who came to contribute to today's proceedings, our committee members who would have participated remotely for this virtual hearing, ensuring that the business of the country goes ahead in these challenging times. I would like to thank the staff of the Parliament for your procedural and logistical support always, and of course, our viewing and listening audience. So I would like to thank you at this time and declare this meeting now adjourned. Do enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and above all, please stay safe.
Thank you, Madam Chair.